Hi, my name is Lily and welcome to my channel and welcome to my combined August and September wrap up. So, in August I read 8 books and in September I read 6. It was a bit of a whirlwind month in September, hence why I am doing the wrap-ups combined now. I will try to keep these as brief as possible so we're not sat here forever, but I will tell you my thoughts on all, or if not most, of the books that I read in those 2 months. So, first up in August, we had Horrorstor by Grady Hendrix. This is only my second Grady Hendrix book, but it was so much better than my first and I really enjoyed it. In fact, I gave this one 5 stars. So this is a haunted house horror. It is set in the kind of knockoff version of IKEA in this world. Every night at this IKEA, it is getting vandalised, so a group of workers from the store decide to stay overnight to see if they can catch whoever is doing it, and they discover things that defy the imagination. This was creepy and weird, and it gets progressively darker and weirder. It was a little bit meta at times where you start to reveal more secrets about the store, and I was very intrigued. I could not stop reading this book. I was absolutely obsessed. I also loaned it out to my dad, who read it very quickly. He's not usually a big horror reader, but he really enjoyed this one, and we went to IKEA not long afterwards and it was a bit of a spooky experience. So if you're not a typical horror reader but you want something a bit different and a bit quirky, I would recommend this one. It was definitely an interesting read. I also reread Throne of Glass by audio. This is my current reread project to try and get Kingdom of Ash read by the end of the year, which is not going well. But I gave it 5 stars again. I absolutely loved it. Of course I did. Then my friend Ian and I buddy read Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. This is a adult contemporary romance. I gave it 4 stars. So this one is about a figure skater and a hockey player, both at college. And the hockey player's rink basically gets destroyed and they have to share the figure skater's rink for the year, basically. And they kind of have this weird connection between them where they have this enemies to lovers dynamic. It's an interesting read. I really did enjoy it, but I felt like it got a bit weird towards the end. There was a lot of contrived drama that didn't contribute to the plot at all. Like, I can't give spoilers, but there's certain things where, like, this isn't really a spoiler, but they, like, meet each other's exes and it has no impact, but it's meant to be this, like, big dramatic scene. And stuff like that, where I was just kind of waiting for it to have some kind of meaning and it didn't. And it felt like the author was putting in these, like, really forced dramatic moments for no reason. But I will say the sex scenes were very well written. I loved that consent was present and repeated throughout this book and it was talked about. And in general, I really enjoyed it. I just felt it was a bit contrived. Then I buddy read Painted Devils by Margaret Owen with my friend Livy from Shells of Starlight. This is a young adult fantasy and it was another 5-star read for me. So I can't tell you much about this one because it is the sequel to Little Thieves. But in this one, we follow our main character as she has accidentally created a cult. I can't say much more than that, but it was so much fun, so silly, so funny, but also had some really interesting topics talked about it throughout, and I really would recommend this series so far. I'm looking forward to the next book. Then I read Make Me Wilder by Serena Bell, the first book in the Wilder Adventures series. This is a contemporary adult romance. In this one, our main character is a marketing expert who is kind of running from her town after an embarrassing event, and she goes to work for an outdoorsy business to help them try and rebrand a little to bring in some more diverse clients and involve like a more spa treatment to the place, and the very gruff owner is not happy about it. So Wild Adventures was fun and kind of silly. I gave it 4 stars. It actually surprised me by being better than I was expecting based on the cover. But yeah, I enjoyed it and I definitely would read it again. Next was my absolute best book of August, and that is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I was really nervous to read this one because of the hype, but it was my in-person book club's pick for August. This is the story of Sadie and Sam, who meet in a children's hospital when they're really young. Sadie is there visiting her sister, who has cancer, and Sam is there recovering from an accident. And it is about how they come together and fall apart throughout their lives, and how video games connects them and breaks them apart. It is beautiful. It's definitely a bit of a Marmite book. At book club, people either loved it or hated it, and I obviously absolutely adored it. I think it's really beautiful. All the characters are kind of unlikable, but that is part of it. They're very messy human beings who you don't always agree with, you don't always believe in, you are kind of yelling at them to just talk to each other, but they are just so interesting to read about. And I'm not a big gamer myself, so I wouldn't say you need to be a big gamer to kind of follow what's going on here, but I think it would help and make it a bit more interesting. But yeah, I adored it. Then I read Just Like Home by Sarah Gailey. This is an adult horror, and I gave this one 4 stars. So this is about a woman who is the daughter of a serial killer, and she is called home by her estranged mother, who kicked her out when she was 18 after her father had been arrested. And she's called her back home to look after her and the house during her final moments as she is currently dying. And it follows our main character as she arrives back in this house with a very strange feeling, and there's currently a lodger living in the shed who has this kind of dark and manipulative nature about him, and it's told both through the present tense of her discomfort around being in the house, and there's kind of a haunted house element to it, and then you also get flashbacks to her childhood showing her love and difficult relationship with her father. I loved this one. I thought the twist at the end was really good. I know that's a very Marmite twist again, but I really enjoyed it. I can't really talk about why I loved it, but I did. It was very creepy, very spooky. It definitely got me feeling a bit on edge, and it's definitely a quirky one to read. My final book of August was The Risk by Elle Kennedy, which is the second book in the Briar You series. It is an adult contemporary romance, and unfortunately this was only a 3-star for me. This one follows the daughter of the Briar hockey coach who we met in book 1, and she is desperate to be a sports reporter. She loves hockey, and so she's trying to apply for an internship at Hockey News or something called that, something similar to that, and she's realising that the owner is very misogynistic but has a great interest in her frenemy Jake Connolly, who plays for Harvard, their rival team. So she gets him to agree to fake date her in order to get closer to the guy who is the head of Hockey News to try and get this internship, and it's a very much an enemies to lovers / friends to lovers romance where they're pretending they hate each other but they don't really. It was all right. It just was missing something. I can't really tell you what it was that made me not enjoy it, but I just couldn't connect to it, and I didn't really care that much. It just felt a bit contrived, and I feel like I'm using that a lot today, contrived. But yeah, it just felt a bit blah. It wasn't my favourite. To be honest, the Briar You series is just not as good as the Off-Campus series, but I persist. My first read in September was As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow by Zulfa Katu. This was the pick for Amy's book club in September. It is a young adult contemporary, I guess, and I gave it 4 stars, and if you can believe it, I set an alarm and everything, but I still missed book club for it. I was so excited to join book club for this one, and I completely missed it. This one is about 18-year-old Salma, who is living in Syria at the height of the Syrian revolution. She is living alone with her sister-in-law after losing the rest of her family in various ways throughout the war. She was training to be a pharmacist before war broke out, but she is now essentially a pseudo-doctor because there just aren't enough medical personnel working in the hospital. And she is battling with the idea of whether she stays out of loyalty to her country and to help the people who need her in the hospital, or whether to leave because her sister-in-law is pregnant and they know that they can't survive if they stay there forever. She also has Korf, who is this vision that she knows is a vision, and is kind of tormenting her, trying to convince her to leave. And one day she meets Keenan, who was actually the boy she was supposed to be meeting to get engaged to before the war breaks out. And she starts to grow closer to him as well, which makes things all the more complicated. This is an incredibly beautiful story, incredibly sad, and it's all about her journey trying to decide whether or not to leave and seeing the struggle. And what I really liked about this book is it did an incredible job of humanising the people in the small boats. As someone who lives in Britain, particularly right now, the small boats migrants is what we're hearing about all the time. The Conservatives are very obsessed with them, and they're very much demonised and dehumanised in British media. And this book does an excellent job of humanising those people once again and reminding you of why they're leaving and what they're facing in their home countries and why they're doing what they're doing. And it's heartbreaking. It is an incredibly difficult read, and honestly, I'm surprised this one is shelved as YA for the content that was in it. I know YA can deal with some very dark topics, but this one felt incredibly heavy, so I would say this definitely leans to the higher end of YA. The reason it didn't get a full 5 stars from me was I felt like it got a bit repetitive in the middle, and I feel like it could have been condensed a little bit down in the middle to kind of make it flow a bit better. But what I really enjoyed is in this one is if you read the author's note, you'll also find out that a lot of the events that happen in this book are based on real life events that have been reported on, and things that some of the characters say are things genuinely people in Syria have said in interviews. Then I read A Close and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers. This is the second book in the Wayfarers series. Without giving spoilers, the premise is about an AI who is trying to adjust to no longer being an AI, basically. It is also about Pepper from book 1, who we meet as a side character, who is helping the other main character in the book, but it also tells of Pepper's origin story and how she came to be who she is and where she is. I loved it. This is so close to the first book in terms of favourites for me, and honestly, when I was trying to pick a favourite between this one and the first book in the series, I was finding it really, really hard. I loved it. The reason it didn't quite pip the first one was because I found the ending a little bit rushed in terms of plot. Without giving any spoilers, it's really hard to give spoilers. Oh, and in case I didn't say, this is an adult sci-fi, but the Wayfarer series is kind of this beautiful slice of life series that happens to be sci-fi. I really enjoyed this book. More so, I enjoyed Pepper's backstory, because Pepper was raised as kind of I think she was a clone in this kind of outcast society where they used cloned children for production and recycling, basically so that the wealthy could live without doing these horrible jobs that no one else wanted to do. And it was incredibly abusive, and they lived in these little homes where they didn't know anything existed outside of their day-to-day life in this recycling factory, basically. And it's about her discovering what's beyond it. And I just loved the thought that Becky Chambers put into what she would know, what she wouldn't know, and just, it was so beautiful. Heartbreaking and beautiful, and just, I loved this book. I love this series so much. And so immediately after I finished that one, I read Record of a Spaceborn Few by Becky Chambers. This is the third book in the Wayfarer series. So this one focuses on the human colonies that are living in the spaceship that I can't remember the name of. It's a collection of ships that the humans first left Earth in. There's different sects of humans in the Wayfarers universe. Some of them have grown up and lived on Mars. They're called the Martians. And then you have those that grew up and live on the original spaceships that they escaped Earth in, and then others who live in space. They're called spacers. They live on ships that move around, and then others are grounders who live on other planets. And so this one focuses on the humans living in the collection of ships that first left Earth that I can't remember the name of, and it follows the people in different roles, exploring what life is like on the ships, what it means to come to this ship. And then you also have a Harmadian, who is an alien, who is a researcher who has come to the ships to get to know how humans there live. I enjoyed it, but it's probably my least favourite of the 3 that I have read so far. I just didn't vibe with it as much. I think I just kind of struggled with, I struggled with how it kind of felt repetitive, and I struggled to tell the difference between the different human characters. Some of them felt a little bit too overlappy to me, but yeah, I really enjoyed it still. It's still a 5-star read for me, and I would still recommend this series a lot. Then I read what I think is the whole of the Sunday Brothers series so far. I don't know if any more are being released. It's been really hard to try and find out, but I don't know. But this is a trilogy, at least at the moment, by May Archer. The first one is called Pick Me, and I gave it 4 stars. It is an adult contemporary romance. This one follows a guy who is kind of fresh out of university, who is going to this orchard to work on kind of updating all of their internal systems and their websites and stuff, general techie stuff. As someone who works in tech, it was incredibly unrealistic that one person could do all of this in the time frame that's set, but you know, it's a book. We'll let it slide. So yeah, he's there to kind of upgrade all of their technical systems, and he is sharing an office with the Sunday brother who has just returned to town due to illness. His family believes that he has quit his job in the city to return to be kind of working on their accounts, taking a break because he had a bit of a breakdown. But in reality, he's actually only on a sabbatical. But he is also like 10 years older than our programmer guy. And they have this kind of undeniable attraction to each other, but the Sunday brother, that I can't remember the name of, is refusing to date the techie guy because he thinks the age gap is too much of an issue, the fact that they work together is too much of an issue, and all of this, and the techie guy is just desperate to get in his pants. It was fun, it was silly. I feel like the kind of emotional growth part of it was okay. It wasn't amazing, but you know, it was fine. It was a solid 4-star read for me. I enjoyed it. I really liked it. It definitely got me wanting to read more. It was more slow burn than I was expecting, but I'm not complaining about that. Then we have Handpicked. This one starts off as an enemies to lovers and then becomes a friends to lovers. It was kind of weird. But this is about the owner of the orchard, who is a single dad with a difficult relationship with his son's mother, who was previously estranged and has now returned to town, and his son's teacher, who is new to town because he won a competition to basically take ownership of this property that neighbours the orchard. And so the father thinks that he has kind of lucked in, he's got this easy life and is kind of resentful of him for it. But in reality, the reason that the previous owner had given this place away is because it was in complete ruins and the teacher just doesn't have the money to fix anything up and is really struggling. There's an incident in the previous book that means they kind of have this hatred towards each other, but one night they decide to put their differences aside over some alcohol, and they misremember a town tradition to do with a horn, and they blow the horn and say the vows, thinking it announces their friendship, when in reality it announces their engagement, and the whole town becomes obsessed with them completing all of the engagement rituals so they can become married. It was another 4-star read. I really liked the romance on this one. They get together a lot quicker. It's less slow burn in this one. I really liked that. It worked better for this story to not be as slow burny, but I felt like all the tasks they had to complete were like really funny, but they weren't done in the funniest way possible. I feel like I could have written it better, basically. But it was still a fun time. I still enjoyed it, and if you're looking for a small town romance, it's worth checking out. And then finally, we have Cherry Picked, which is about the youngest Sunday brother, who is still a virgin despite being 20-something. I can't remember. And he decides he wants to lose his virginity to someone who's important to him. So he asks his longtime crush, best friend, and also boss to take his virginity for him. And that doesn't go down very well. And so it is about the strained relationship between them after this and his continual efforts to try and get him to agree to take his virginity. But then also the forest around them is about to be kind of demolished in order for a new resort to be built, and the youngest Sunday brother is not happy about this and decides to become a one-man activist group to try and stop it from happening. This one's probably my least favourite of the three. I gave it a 3.5. I really liked the characters themselves. I thought they were really interesting. I loved that they had their struggles. I loved seeing their different perspectives on the same issues. They were generally very interesting and really likeable characters. And I liked the progression of the environmentalist plot. I really liked seeing how they kind of start to discover things aren't quite as black and white as it seems, and it's not all about stopping everything. But the romance itself felt like it stagnated quite quickly in the middle. It was very repetitive. It kind of dragged on for too long. And I think it's because ultimately there wasn't enough stopping the romance. And so the author didn't want to come up with some like silly drama for no reason, but then also there just was no reason, so it just kind of dragged on and on. It got a bit repetitive, and I wasn't a big fan of the epilogue. Gonna be honest, the epilogues in all of these I feel like are a little bit rushed. But yeah, again, if you want a silly little small town romance, this series is a good one to check out. Those were all of the books that I read in September and August. Hopefully it didn't take me too long to get through all of those. I had a very up and down couple of months, but August definitely was better. I read lots of really good books in August, and I have a huge TBR in October to get cracking on with, so hopefully I will talk to you about more great books then. So let me know in the comments, like, what were your favourite books in August and September? Have you read any of the books I talked about? What are your thoughts on them? If you'd like to leave me a comment just to let me know that you are here, please leave me an apple emoji in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!